Welcome, everybody. Welcome. And just to announce, for those of you who are used to Women in Consumer Finance sessions, which are by design all women, but we opened it up to the fabulous men who were interested in this topic. So welcome, guys. It's great to see you. This is a topic that requires all hands on deck, and so we wanted to include everyone who was interested. So, all right, I will kick things off. Welcome. I am Stephanie Eidelman, and I'm the owner and CEO of Women in Consumer Finance. And on behalf of our team, I'm excited to bring you this fourth and final 2023 WCF virtual workshop. The theme for today's session is From Barriers to Impact, Retaining Underrepresented Talent. This workshop and panel discussion is presented in collaboration with Management Leadership for Tomorrow, our new partner this year, which I'm super excited about. Crystal Anise Walker, who is Senior Director at MLT, was one of our fabulous keynote speakers at WCF last December. And so I'm really thrilled to have deepened our relationship in our partnership this year with her and with the organization. So just quickly, why do I focus on this topic? It's not particularly an individual career topic, but women make up nearly 90% of personal and family financial decisions, but represent only about 24% of leadership positions in financial services. And of course, the percentage of women of color is far lower than that, even in some cases, not hardly measurable. My passion is to get women to these tables where decisions are made and to support more inclusive financial services, more satisfying and rewarding careers, and financial independence for all women. So, a small thing, right? It's one thing to hire underrepresented talent, if you can do that, but to retain and grow this talent is a much more complex undertaking. Which brings me to Crystal. But indulge me for just another moment for a couple of announcements, and then we'll get going on the topic. I want to thank Track America, and especially Roxanne Bartley, their Chief Revenue Officer, for sponsoring today's session and for sponsoring all of our virtual workshops this year. Both Roxanne and Track have been longtime participants in the WCF community, and I'm grateful for their continued support. I'd like to mention a couple of things about our annual Leadership Summit, which is coming up in Palm Springs, December 11th to 13th of this year. I'm super excited to share that we're still running well ahead of our number of registrations that we had at this point last year. And last year we sold out a month in advance. Also, our early registration discount ends September 30th. So now is the time to sign up if you haven't already done so, or if you know your colleagues are going to be coming, make sure they sign up. And make your hotel reservations also right away if you haven't done so, because those are filling up and they did sell out last year, and the pre-conference activities as well. And so in just a moment, or Kylie can grab this for me, if we will put the link in the chat for the where you can sign up for your hotel and for pre-conference activities. And one more thing I want to mention is that our WCF Uplift Award program, sponsored for the second year in a row by Sarah Wagerman and Armed Compliance Business Solutions. This program allows you to nominate one or more amazing women who exceed expectations, they're shining stars, they're super connectors, they're mega mentors, and basically just embody our best image of what a woman in consumer finance should be. Nominations are open also until the end of the month, and so you can find the link on womeninconsumerfinance.com, or we'll put it in the chat here as well. And so go ahead and think about those in your circle who deserve recognition, and be sure to nominate them by September 30th. All right. And of course, I want to let you know we're recording today's session. You probably noticed that if we started when you were here. And so if you miss any of it or want to share it with any of your colleagues, you'll be able to do that shortly, within a few days of this session. We'll send it out. Okay, now let's introduce Crystal Walker and also our panel moderator, Shannon Bell. Okay, Crystal, with over 15 years of experience, Crystal Lenise Walker has helped organizations develop operational processes to curate equitable and inclusive workplaces through result-driven methods. As a consultant, she uses cultural intelligence to catalyze change and disruption within the diversity, equity, and inclusion sector. And Crystal is the Senior Director for Management Leadership for Tomorrow's Racial Equity at Work program, leading the MLT Black Equity at Work and MLT Hispanic Equity at Work certifications to drive Black and Hispanic equity across corporations in the US. And Shannon, who is going to lead our panel discussion in the second half of the session today, is a lover of policy, people, and puzzles. Prior to her work at MLT, her most recent work has been in urban education at the intersection of policy, data, and technology. Shannon has helped shape policy, build data systems, and develop applications during her 10-year service at both the District of Columbia Public Schools and the State Education Agency, Office of the State Superintendent of Education for the District of Columbia. She hails from Dallas, Fort Worth metro area, and she received her master's in public policy from American University here in my hometown, DC, and bachelor's in political science from Spelman College. Outside of work, Shannon is a founding board member of a nonprofit organization based in DC, which centers its work on racial equity and youth-led civic engagement. So we've got a whole bunch of expertise here, and with that, I am going to hand it over to Crystal.
Hello and good afternoon for those on the East Coast, and good morning to those who are out West. It's so great to be here. Thank you, Stephanie. It's always a joy. I am or was a first-time attendee of the conference last year, and I had such a ball, and I've shared this many times, and I will continue to, that as knows how to extrovert for a little bit, your conference was absolutely the best. So I highly recommend it. Even as someone who went alone last year, I was able to make connections. So shout out to any ladies here that were in group 21 or team 21 with me. And I think I also saw Danielle, who had a ball getting a chance to meet, and we're going to plan to connect with each other. And I also see on the call that I'm the junior namesake, but my fellow colleague here, Crystal, is on the call, and she's actually going to be joining us this year for the conference for her first time. So I'm looking forward to bringing on a buddy with me at this round. So thank you. So I'm going to share my screen, as we all know how that works on the virtual page of things. And then now I have to do the, obligation of asking to make sure everyone can see it. So we're all good there, Stephanie? Okay. So I'm really looking forward to talking about this topic with all of you today. And I love doing these type of conversations and trainings. One, because in a previous life or before MLT, I was actually a college professor. So this sometimes gives me the opportunity to kind of go back to my roots and have the opportunity to share and hear more from others of what your needs are in learning. But it's most important that all of you are here. And I love that this is a group who you made the decision to be a part of this conversation. And thank you to Stephanie for opening this up to just beyond the Women in Consumer Finance members here, but being able to have more folks, because what that tells me is that not only do you have an interest, but you took the time out of your schedule to be here, because this is more than just an interest. It's an area that you want to find ways to have an impact. And so I'm looking forward to this. I do want you to know that will be time for us to have some conversations and questions throughout. So feel free to put questions in the chat. I'll try to respond to those as they're coming through, or even some toward the end. But also for the second half of this session, as Stephanie mentioned, you're going to hear from panelists who are partnering with MLT in our racial equity at work certification programs, but that are finding true ways to actually make progress in having a partner, but also in progress when it comes to retaining their underrepresented talent. And so there'll also be a treat for you all to hear from leaders like yourselves and from those that are on the ground, hearing exactly what's happening in real time. So let's get this kicked off and let's get started. Of course, my mouse would not want to work. So let me give you a little bit about MLT. So MLT is a national nonprofit based in Washington, D.C., right outside of D.C. Our office is in Bethesda, but we are really transforming the most influential organizations and employers here in the United States by providing them with real DEI strategies, some insights, data, real tactics that are actually proven to be successful in equipping high-achieving Black, Latinx, Hispanic, and Native American talent. Specifically, those are the communities that MLT has supported, and we've been doing so for nearly 20 years. And we have so much data and insights in this area, which is why companies want to partner with us. But more importantly, it's about the mission of impacting and changing the lives of people of color, going from a state of just surviving and actually having opportunities to survive and thrive. One of the things about MLT is that our mission is really, truly around closing the racial equity gap, closing the wealth gap that is being experienced by different communities. And why is that so important for employers? Because employers are the biggest gateway into opening up opportunities through the income that's provided, the benefits that are provided, and having opportunities for communities to actually grow within organizations. That is the long work that we have to do. And so this work can't just be siloed socially, but we're seeing a great interest in doing this work on the corporate level and working with partners. And that's where DEI really gets its start. How do we help make that happen? And so please, again, feel free to ask questions as we go through, and I'm always looking for your additional ideas and thoughts. But I'm going to start off with talking about an insight from MLT that we call our degrees of difference. And this helps lay the foundation of understanding what it truly means when we talk about underrepresented talent, who that covers, and what blankets do people fall up under. And so when we look at the degrees of difference, this is a series of identities that compound and distinguish an individual as different from others in their environment. In other words, looking at these particular statuses or factors, which of these statuses and factors impact an individual the most from feeling as though they belong or are different from others within that environment that they're looking into. And if you can look from this chart, this diagram actually shows that we took a look at multiple factors, including personality type, family structure, native language, citizenship status, educational background, sexual orientation, social economic status, gender, and race and ethnicity. And if you notice, the three biggest areas that take up more than 50% are social economic status, gender, and race and ethnicity. And for those of you that are a part of the Women in Consumer Finance group, we've had great leadership opportunities and conversations through this platform about what it means to be a woman in the workplace. And so we already, several of us can recognize that from the gender perspective of knowing what it feels like to be different and knowing that degree of difference and the impact that that degree of difference has on your life. But what we've uncovered is that race and ethnicity has the largest degree of difference in the experience of those feeling whether or not they are included and whether or not there's a difference. And so as we're thinking about underrepresented talent, all of these play a factor in areas that are underrepresented within those communities. But we have to be mindful and think about what are the areas that can provide us with the biggest opportunities for impact and change. And as you can see here, focusing on social economic status, gender, and race are some of the biggest intersections that can have the biggest impact. And so that the work that we're doing goes much further along and who we're able to impact and the lives that we can actually change and the workplaces that we can make better. So I'm pretty sure that several of you are very aware of the DEI commitments within your own organizations. You've seen the uptick of conversations. You've seen the outreach of wanting to know more. How do I make the next move? What do we do to continue to make strides in the workplace? Or what are we doing to do things differently socially? And so we've continued to see an increase in interest in diversity, equity, inclusion. And while that interest of DEI is going up, we're also seeing increases in education levels for underrepresented talent in different diverse and racially diverse communities. Despite those things both going up on the rise, there hasn't been much progress. In fact, that progress has been oftentimes very limited from what we would hope to see at this stage of or level of commitments that we've seen. Now, I want to be clear. This does not mean that because there's a lack of progress, doesn't mean that there's a lack of effort. And so there are lots of organizations, companies, and individuals who are all doing things that help contribute to moving the needle forward and actually making the ground and spaces more equitable. But from a larger scale, it means that we have to do something that's scalable. We have to do something that's bigger in order to really see the impact of all of the work that we're doing. Otherwise, we just kind of continue to chip away at that work. And so one of the things that we've been doing at MLT is looking at what is needed within the workplace, both from the perspective of the employers, but also what's needed from the talent that's there, so that there is a clear understanding that DEI is a value, but also there are clear opportunities for growth and clear opportunities for people to feel as though they belong. We actually conducted a recent CDO study at MLT, and 78% of CDOs, and so those are our chief diversity officers, have noted that, the state of DEI has become exceedingly important for CEOs. And when things become exceedingly important for CEOs, for so many on this call, that means it's exceedingly important to everyone. And so what we're seeing is that more middle level managers want to know more about what they could do. More hiring managers want to know what they want to do. But despite all of this kind of increased investment and interest, what we're noticing is that more and more employers need to know how to actually put forth strategic plans in order to actually identify gaps and to actually resolve the issues versus just doing random acts. And so that's really important in this conversation that we're going to have today, because if you understand the voices of the underrepresented talent that's out there, it helps you to better create strategies that implement impact initiatives that are actually going to help make it a better workplace for everyone, in addition to retaining that talent and having the opportunity to really change the career trajectory of those, while also preserving all of the value that your organizations are investing into that talent. So oftentimes, recruitment is the number one area that folks want to focus when it comes to representation. And I understand why. And I'm pretty sure that several of you have seen an uptick of positions, uptick of opportunities. Your companies may be changing their strategies for recruitment. They are outreaching to more partners and looking for different ways and avenues to connect with different diverse talent. However, recruitment isn't the only way that you can build a diverse workforce. One of the most important ways to build a diverse workforce is from within, and actually creating opportunities for career growth and opportunities that allow employees within these underrepresented communities to feel as though they belong, because that's when you're going to retain them. So there's some data here that I wanted to share in relation to the 2021 EEO1 data reporting. And so EEO-1 reporting is a reporting mechanism that we all have to report to, or organizations have to report to, if you are a public company. And all of the data there is actually available for any of you to actually pull. I actually recommend it. It's a great resource to understand what's happening in the landscape of your industry, what's happening by race, by gender. You can look at geographic areas. And so that's actually really great data and a tip for anyone here that has to think about representation and what that looks like as you're doing hiring. But with this particular data, what we're seeing is that despite all of these efforts and despite recruitment efforts for more diverse talent, when we take a look at by level of job function, as you can see, that number gets smaller and smaller. And so this is broken up in looking at 4 key racially diverse communities: Black, Hispanic, AAPI, and the Native American communities. And as you can tell here, we have, look at senior management and where it really is. This means that across the board of all senior managers that were reported by EEO-1, only 3.6 of those were Black, 4.7% were Hispanic, 7.1% were AAPI, and less than 1% at 0.3% were Native American. And so, but the middle row, right, we get a little bit better, but that means that there's a pipeline there. When I take a look at professional and overall, it means there's pipelines here, there's opportunities here for long-term retention through looking at what your companies are being able to do with even your job functions and how do you build opportunities. The Bureau of Labor Statistics actually shared that, since this Great Resignation, which I can imagine that some of you have felt the impact of that, we saw lots of companies having employees leaving voluntarily. Some of that may have impacted some of your teams, even personally. And although that has slowed down, one of the things that we're still seeing is that people are still interested in leaving their companies if they don't feel like they belong, if they don't feel like it's a place that they are of value and that their value is being noted, and also how you're working externally with the communities and the commitments that you're making. We have smarter consumers who are demanding more socially from our organizations that we're seeing. You have investors and additional stakeholders who want to ensure that you are building more and more diverse workplaces. And that can't just be resolved with recruitment. You have to think about the long-term investment that you're making in building a diverse pipeline and building a diverse workforce. It's so that your company continues to have diversity throughout and not just in peak moments of time. We did a recent MLT survey, and it actually corroborated the statistics that we found from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which actually showed that nearly 50% of the respondents within our 10,000 plus alumni network are planning to leave in the next 2 years. And you're talking about top talent with MBAs from top tier business schools across the country. You're talking about people who are at middle to senior level executives, all the way through each of these job functions who it's on their mind for the next 2 years, which means that it's not too late for organizations to make the shift. It's what do you want to do to make that shift? And are you going to do it with the same strategic approach? And just to break this down for my group of folks in finance, I know finance is broad and you all have different viewpoints in what you do with finance. But if I take a moment to tell you about the bottom line, studies have shown that it costs 6 to 9 months' salary on average to replace someone that you've lost. And so if you have an employee who's making $60,000 a year, that's $30,000 to $45,000 that it's going to cost in recruitment, plus what it's going to take to get them to say yes. And we won't even talk about the silent tax of all of the work that others within that team had to pick up for the loss of that particular team member, right? And not to mention what that does to morale based on the role of that team member that we potentially lose. So thinking about retention is what I call playing chess and not checkers. It's thinking about creating a work environment that not only do your employees want to remain, but that can help with your long-term recruitment because of the referrals that come in that continue to create a diverse pipeline for yourself. So the first thing that you really have to do is understand underrepresented talent life and work experiences. If you don't have a clear understanding of what their life and work experiences actually look like, it becomes very hard for you or any organization to make the necessary changes that are actually going to have impact. It's easy for us to kind of choose these random acts of diversity because we think that's the right thing to do, right? Okay, there's a holiday coming up and there's something socially happening, so we should have a webinar, and we're going to do 30 minutes and have some food, and then that solves the issue. That doesn't necessarily on its own make it a great place to work, especially if when they go back into their meetings with their team members or their managers, they're having a very different work and lived experience in that office from what they heard in that training. And so we want to make sure that although that's a great step, how do you make sure that that's an actionable step that's actually going to have real change and not just a Band-Aid and not just performative? So let's get into kind of the voices that we're hearing. So MLT actually conducted an alumni survey of our 10,000 plus alumni in 2020. And what we wanted to do was uncover how the impact of those degrees of difference that I shared with you earlier was having on them. And this is verbatim some of the quotes that they've shared, but also just wanted to recap some of the data that we found. I will say we did not find it surprising, but unfortunately, we want to make sure that this is not what we're seeing in the workplace. So 95% of our respondents have experienced racism in a past workplace. 89% of underrepresented talent have been the only person of color on their entire team. 89%. 78% of underrepresented talent felt that they face greater scrutiny or requirements to reach the same level of respect, achievement, or acknowledgement than their peers. 66% of underrepresented talent face difficulty finding mentors or sponsors. So I'm going to stop there and just give you all a moment to take a look at that, because this isn't just in the silo of MLT. Pew Research recently did a poll and they found very similar results than what we did, right? This isn't something that's just an anomaly. This is being something that we not only have data, but you've also heard the anecdotal stories, right? We've heard stories even through our Women in Consumer Finance. We've shared stories. We've heard from, the leaders that we've been working with. You've heard from your colleagues about experiences that they had, and yet we can't seem to get beyond just listening to them. What do we do to those stories? What do we do and what do we take away so that we can actually create an environment where this is not the norm? 89% of underrepresented talent shouldn't be the only person of color ever on their team, right? There should be a reason that the place is more reflective and, creates this identity and opportunity for them to have an environment where they can actually thrive. And so one of the things about this is that it's easy to overlook these voices because we often think that everything is based on a meritocracy. We think that everyone has the same equal opportunity. We all had a chance to go to college. We all had a chance to get that same degree. We all know how to navigate, the corporate space. We all know how to apply to get the job. We all know how to do, we can keep going down the list of making the assumptions that everyone has had the same path, although you may be at the same destination right now. That path and how they got there drastically changes how you behave in your destination. And so we often think that, hey, everyone's got the same fair shot, but we know that there are some things both systemic and socially, as well as individually related, that can hinder that actually becoming true. And one of our respondents actually shared this with us. And they shared, I think we all like to think that things are a meritocracy, but no matter how much you achieve educationally or professionally, you will always have to show the person shared, this is something that is on their mind at all times. In every experience that they have, they're carrying that weight. But one of the things that I also recognize is that for some of us, we may not know what these experiences look like in real time. It is easy for us to say, yes, they've experienced racism in the workplace. And actually some, reports have shown and some surveys have shown that only 48% of white people in the workplace actually think that their peers experience racism. Interestingly about that, however, more white women do believe that there are others who are experiencing racism in the workplace than white men. But again, it's because I think we have some very extreme ideas of what that looks like in the workplace. And so I want to point out some things that we found. The experiences are often misunderstood and overlooked, which leads to a lack of having a place of belonging. So on the left, we've kind of outlined that, this is what some leaders or managers or even colleagues expect to see. They expect to hear someone being called a racial slur or experiencing a racially charged incident that was very clear. They want to know that there was, intentionally excluded from work or a social event, or denied a promotion or, a raise because of it, or denied access to a location or a space. And all of these have to be really cut and dry and clear. But what actually happens are on the other side. And I know we've had trainings about unconscious bias and microaggressions, but what's really happening is not always as clear to others if they don't recognize what they're seeing and they don't know that these are behaviors that are used to accomplish some of the same uncomfortable environments. So, there are often times where folks are assumed to be in a service position. They face greater scrutiny. They're told how to appear more professional. As some of you may know, as women here in this group, there actually was a law that was passed in New York called the Crown Act, which actually said that employers could no longer discriminate against Black women wearing their hair the way that I have my hair today, or wearing their hair out in its natural curly state. And so there are moments where this is not just about a law, it's impacting the lives of someone. And these are the experiences that people are facing. And whether or not you always notice them, they are still happening. And one of the things that can't be misunderstood or understated is that how colleagues respond, how managers respond when they are hearing the voices and the feedback from their colleagues, their peers, and their team members. You have to make sure that your organization has things in place that will allow you to actually move beyond this. And so now I actually want to talk about what are the common root causes that lead to environments like this, and what are some actual strategies that you all can begin to think about implementing and the approach that you want to take to actually start resolving some of this. So in order to actually resolve anything related to diversity, equity, inclusion, you actually need to have the same approach that you have for any other business imperative that's on your plate. Most of us in this room know what it means and know what it takes to have to develop a strategic plan with clear outcomes, with clear ownership, the program management of it all. You have to take a look and assess your resources. We all know what that process looks like. But oftentimes with diversity, equity, inclusion, we too often rely on those, again, those random acts of diversity versus actually developing this with the same rigorous and strategic approach that we would do for any of our other business units. And so this isn't going to look like anything unfamiliar to most of you on this call, but you have to first identify what your gaps are. And then you have to diagnose those gaps through a root cause analysis. Then you want to actually develop a strategy that specifically aligns to those root causes that you were able to uncover. And then you actually set goals and map out accountability. Who's going to drive this forward? Who's going to be held accountable? And what does accountability look like? Most of you have seen this happen or been a part of some part of this kind of cycle and wheel that we use to, again, address any other business imperative. But I want you all to think about how you might apply this same strategy and approach if you wanted to develop a strategy to actually retain talent and diverse talent within your organization. What would you have to do? Where would you have to start? And oftentimes when we think about identifying gaps and diagnosing root causes, most companies have some data, but they don't go deep enough in aligning that with the anecdotal data that they're being provided to actually develop a survey or actually develop opportunities to collect more information to allow you to deep dive into the information that you have to give yourself a clear picture of what the real root cause is, being honest with yourself and your organization so that you can resolve that. So, what are some of the common root causes? One of the things that we've noticed in our research is that there are two clear drivers when it comes to underrepresented talent of racially diverse communities. The first driver is not feeling a sense of belonging. And the second driver is not understanding their career growth trajectories. Those are the two biggest drivers when it comes to retaining underrepresented talent, which leads to those conversations and thoughts and plans, as we saw earlier, of 50% of them looking to leave within the next 2 years. And so one of the things that you want to do is really, again, go back to those root causes. So what I've done is highlighted a few of the common root causes that we've seen through our work with multiple employers across the country and looking exactly at retaining their diverse talent. And so if we take a look at, what are the root causes as it relates to fostering a sense of belonging, we found 3. The first was a significant engagement gap between underrepresented talent employees. The second was a lack of understanding or underestimation of underrepresented talent. And third, that people, leaders, and managers lack skills to actually build confidence in underrepresented talent employees and their experience. What's interesting is that we also noted that when talent actually feel a sense of belonging, as well as having a clear career growth trajectory, they're 4 times more likely to stay. 4 times more likely to stay if you could just identify and work with these 2 areas that we identified, specifically related to belonging, as well as career trajectory. So when we think about fostering a sense of belonging, it's easy to think about some of those random acts of diversity, offering trainings, offering opportunities to have town halls, having leadership training. All of those things are great, but they're not enough on their own. And so here are a few best practices that you can incorporate into your strategy that connect with one another and gives you more accountability. The first is to actually create more pathways for underrepresented talent to access experienced leaders for guidance about career growth. In other words, as some of them shared, it was hard to find a mentor. It was hard to find a sponsor. And so, again, having a more diverse workplace means that you have more diverse members of different communities that can serve as mentors. But it doesn't mean that if you don't have a diverse workforce, that you shouldn't be training all of your leaders and people managers to be great mentors and stewardships for underrepresented talent. So the first is making sure that they actually have someone that they can go to for additional coaching and understanding and guidance. Another best practice is providing managers with ways to actually increase proximity to the underrepresented talent employee experience. Again, oftentimes it's a lack of not understanding or knowing. It doesn't necessarily mean that you outright didn't care, but you don't know what you don't know. Oftentimes we focus on unconscious bias, and actually more opportunities lie when you could actually understand people's lived and shared experiences rather than focusing on separated topics of discussion that don't always align with the experiences of those that are around you. The third would be to actually incorporate some learnings that actually instill confidence. Most of us know that a lot of our mentoring and coaching and a lot of our program and development programs that we have are always focused on hard skills, right? Or soft skills for coaching or how to take feedback. But are we learning how to help instill confidence and underrepresented talent? And instilling confidence is a key factor here, because if they've been having those experiences, as I previously shared, that hits your confidence level to think that when it is time for you to speak up, or you do want to step up to a project and lead, or that you are confident that someone is going to make a recommendation for your name, it's going to come up in a conversation. Do I have the confidence to know that when I do speak up, that my voice is going to be heard and valued? I'm not going to be belittled, or I'm not going to be made to feel as though my experience or what I brought to the table was not enough. And so that's why it's important to also find and look for ways to help instill confidence and to continue to nurture those underrepresented talent and give them the opportunities to shine and showcase and to stretch themselves. Last but not least, I want to mention incorporating cultural contributions, or what we call core value work, into the evaluation process, as well as consideration for promotion and bonuses. Oftentimes, people of color, as well as women, and especially women of color at the intersection of both, are oftentimes given what we call the voluntold opportunities, and at a rate in which they're putting a lot more work into what they get out. So example, hey, I want you to lead this ERG. This would be great exposure for you. And then they dump everything on this person along with the workload that they already had. And at the end of the year, they may not have nearly as many additional professional development trainings, or maybe they didn't hit the mark on some of benchmarks that their team members had, but they also weren't asked or voluntold, or kind of had that secret or hidden pressure to accept that additional role. And so as you want to build opportunities, and you can make these opportunities open for everyone, but the key is, are we valuing when we're asking underrepresented talent to share their lived experiences or to use their experiences to lead or uphold our diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives? It's not a great way to create an environment for anyone to want to stay if they know that they're just asked to do more work simply because of who they are at work. Secondly, the second driver here that I mentioned was more underrepresented talent. It's clear that they don't understand or know about the resources that are available at organizations when it comes to their career growth potential, and oftentimes not receiving actionable feedback. So the three common root causes that we've seen here is that there's insufficient org-wide transparency and focus and or accountability when it comes to anything related to promotions, retention. And what I mean by that is oftentimes that information is kind of trickled down from leader to leader until it gets to the middle management level, likely, where they're supposed to go over the review of what it takes to be promoted or what it takes to be evaluated. And we kind of assume that those conversations are happening. And then around time, when it's time to do your big evaluation, then you'll kind of get another announcement. But that's not always clear for everyone and for every team. And so one of the things that's clear is that more organizations need to find more ways to make sure that they're providing this information to their employees, and that this information is getting trickled down to underrepresented talent, because underrepresented talent are telling us that they're not getting the same information. Another common root cause is not actually having clear information regarding expectations and standards for promotions. Is it clear how anyone can make a lateral move, or is it clear how anyone or what their standards are to go from their current level to the next one? And last, bias in promotion and the evaluation process. What's interesting about this is that we found that actually people leaders and managers need more consistent training on how to give feedback, because when race is the difference of degree, what we're seeing is that 75% of underrepresented talent and people of color in the workplace do not get the same level of feedback as their white peers. And this is often because white managers and leaders don't want to seem racist. They don't want to seem as though they're saying something wrong. And what happens is that there's a missed opportunity for a balance of constructive feedback, because just because I'm in part of a racially diverse community doesn't mean I don't want to get great feedback that's going to really help me improve to the next level. And I don't want someone to be afraid to give me that feedback. And so one of the ways that companies need to work on this is actually providing their managers, including middle managers, more training on how to have these conversations so that they're more comfortable, so that your underrepresented talent are feeling like they are getting the exact same level of feedback that their peers are getting. Also, enhancing your transparency of those career paths that you have. And last but not least, having some accountability for your leadership and align those with your core values. So if DEI is part of your central and core values that you have, there should be accountability metrics around how you're moving forward and how you're engaging with all of your employees. But most importantly, what are the engagement levels that you're seeing? Are they going up for your underrepresented talent? Are you able to cultivate their talent? Are you able to give them the tools that they need in order to continue to give back to the organization, the company, and their value, but also addressing the drivers that they have, which is, do I have a path at this organization long-term as opposed to a short-term solution? And so I'll stop here. I know I saw a few questions, but Stephanie, were there any specific questions in the chat?
See any questions in the chat, but folks should feel free to raise their hand if I missed something, and that's not the case.
Great.
But I think you're good.
Okay. And so what I wanted to do here was talk about how can a company actually be successful taking a look at those strategies and putting them into place. And in 2021, our advisory department actually worked with a private credit fund, and they had about a workforce of about 200 employees. They had offices in London. They also had offices in New York. They're in the financial services industry, and they had about 38 million in revenue, and they were founded back in 1981. And this was a company who noticed that they were struggling with retaining their underrepresented talent. And they were trying to figure out what are the pain points and what is happening within our organization that's leading to these consistent results of low attrition. And one of the things that we were able to do was we helped them first benchmark where they were. And actually, once we benchmarked them, we actually found that where they were in their industry, they were actually last in race as well as in gender when it came to serving those two underrepresented communities. And so one of the things that we uncovered was that the same two drivers we had already identified were exactly the case in their organization. The URT there found it hard to break through into both formal and informal networks. And let me help you all understand and think about breaking into those networks and why that's important. As you're thinking about who's in your organization, we often learn things through informal channels. But based on those degrees of difference, you tend to work with those who are more closely aligned to your own degrees of difference and identities when possible, which also means that you casually have conversations with them. It changes who you go to lunch with. It changes who you chat with after work and talk about your TV show. And something casual could be mentioned that someone's aware of that someone else is not. And so that's what we mean by those informal channels. And so they were experiencing the same exact pain points that we were seeing across other organizations. But they recognized they also had no clear paths, and they didn't have any defined navigation to actually help their employees advance. And, all of their employees were feeling really easily moved by community companies because they felt like those companies had really clear trajectories of where to go. And so MLT actually took the same approach that I'm recommending to you all and worked with them to help identify those root causes, help to develop clear strategies, help to identify accountability for their leaders and their leadership. And we actually helped draft a vision and goals for them for the long term. And we even helped them, prioritize the initiatives that they needed to implement, and also provided them with communication support so that it made it clear what they were doing internally, so that all of their employees were aware of where the organization was going and how they were going to achieve those, core values.
Crystal, I wonder have you had the opportunity to observe whether just a sheer number of underrepresented talent people at a company would solve a lot of these problems in and of itself, because just sort of their safety in numbers, or you can do all the training that you want, it seems to me, but if you're the only one, it's always going to feel different. But if you're one of many, then it's just the whole thing is normalized. Could it be as simple as that?
I wish. But I think that is one important area for it, right? And I kind of alluded to that earlier, is that in order to build and continue to have a diverse workforce, you have to have a diverse workforce now, because that continues to build the culture at your organization through your referrals, through your overall branding that you're able to show to your, stakeholders and those who may be of interest. But to something that you shared, Stephanie, when you asked about, could this resolve the issue? If you have more underrepresented talent in the organization who still do not have the same level of access to those opportunities, to knowing about the career pathing, to understanding how to navigate those informal and formal spaces, then now you just have more underrepresented talent that you are potentially losing, because you still haven't resolved, does this community have all of the resources and knowledge that they need? So you actually still need those who are not part of those underrepresented communities, who are being there as mentors, who are participating and aligned with the core values of the organization, because they help, right, expand that network. They help share and make those recommendations. You have far more people. In addition to the fact that it can be hard when you're already the only one, but sometimes, this could be overlooked. But when there's a small group of you, that's even more pressure, because now it constantly may look like, are they doing something on the side? Are they just trying to take care of themselves? Are they not being team players? And so again, solving it isn't just by hiring more underrepresented talent. It's making sure that all of the underrepresented talent who are in your organization have the exact same opportunities as everyone else, so that as you get more underrepresented talent, they have those same opportunities.
And I guess it also depends on where they sit in the organization as well. If everybody's at a lower level, that's not going to solve it. Dion put a question in the chat here. Do you want me to read it, or can you see it yourself?
Sure. Can you read it for me?
Sure. How do you help organizations quantify the budget needed to sustain these programs over multiple years? This may be a bigger conversation, but just curious if this is ever cited as an issue from your CDO feedback.
So Dion, you hit me with a great question. I actually helped write a piece for MLT, and I would be more than happy, Stephanie, to share that with you afterwards, and you can forward it on to Dion, talking about how to allocate budget spending when it comes to your underrepresented talent and underrepresented talent recruitment. And one of the things that we identified, again, is if looking at your gaps, where are your biggest gaps when you're looking at engagement? Where can you have the biggest impact? Taking a look at your root causes. Some of the things that we notice is that different communities have different needs for equity, and so the budgeting can change. But what I highly recommend, and what MLT recommended in our write-up, is that take a look at where you have the biggest gaps and balance that with where you have opportunities for wins. The other thing that's I want to, emphasize and stress here is that, Stephanie shared that I, lead our racial equity at work, and we have 2 different certifications, one for our MLT Black equity at work and one for Hispanic equity at work. And what we've been able to do with our partners is show that you can actually get more bang for your buck as you look at your root causes and find that there are areas within certain communities that you have synergy where you can increase your impacts, and then you can utilize additional funding and the rest of your budget to then prioritize by where are the next biggest gaps that we have in the areas for the best improvement. But the key for that, Dion, is having everyone on board to recognize and to prioritize, because one of the biggest questions is your organization still going to give you the budget for it?
You got an applause from Dion on that. So
thank you, Dion.
No more questions at this point.
So just as we get ready to wrap up here and start our panel in just a few moments, I just wanted to remind you all that, businesses are taking a huge risk if you are ignoring the voices of underrepresented talent and not looking to actually develop workplaces that provide a sense of belonging, but also have very clear career trajectory and growth and development opportunities. You need to develop a plan, identify those gaps, uncover your root causes, set clear strategies and plans that actually address the root cause. And last but certainly not least, have and drive accountability across your leadership. Those are very important. And, that's how you would approach and have the rigor and strategic vision for any other business imperative. And so as you are thinking about how you can support your organizations, regardless of what level you work in the organization, you can find ways to contribute to making sure that they know what they need to be doing. You can talk to them about organizations that you can partner with, but also making sure that you are finding ways to create a sense of belonging with the team members that you have. So thank you all for this first half. Stephanie, I'll turn it back over to you as I know our panelists are getting ready.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, as the panelists get ready, we did have one more question from Kelly, which is probably a good elephant in the room question. When you mention budget, doesn't that turn some employers off ASAP? I suspect you could say a lot about what that implies if people are turned off by the word budget, but.
Well, again, our approach is that you should be taking the same approach that you have for any other business imperative. And if your organization needed something, whether it was a finite resource that you needed to buy some software, or you needed to actually put the resources in to send folks to training, you would do that if that was going to impact one of those other business initiatives. And so DEI can't be random acts and unfunded. So there does need to be a budget, because there are fundamental things, which ironically start with the word fun, that you need in order to make some of these things move the needle. And so the bigger question is, why wouldn't we have a budget if this is a core value for our organization?
All right, here we are, as promised, back in 2 minutes. Crystal, I give it back to you to kick off our panel.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Stephanie, would you mind pinning our panelists so that way everyone can see them while we go through this? So thank you all for coming back. So glad to have you back. And for those of you that were able to join us for this second half, I'm really excited about the second half of the panel. And I'm actually going to turn this over in just a moment to Shannon, who's one of our associate directors of partner success. But I'm really excited about this opportunity because this partnership with Women in Consumer Finance has been growing for almost 2 years now, Stephanie. I was not supposed to meet Stephanie. However, my boss ended up having to go out of town, and he said, "We've got a really great opportunity. I know Stephanie. Can you go and meet with her?" And we had that opportunity to have a great conversation. It led to so many more. And like I said, going to the conference last year was absolutely amazing. And I said, even though I'm not Women in Consumer Finance, I can come. And she's like, "You absolutely can." And it was, one of the best opportunities I had. But I was really excited about this webinar when she and I were talking about panelists, because I said, well, I know some strong women who are doing excellent work in this space. And so to have the opportunity to actually have a full panel of women who are in various stages of DEI work and in their career and from different perspectives. So I am super excited about this. I'm probably more excited to hear from the panelists myself. and getting to hear all of their expertise. And so without further ado, I will turn it over to Shannon.
Hi, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Well, thank you, Crystal. So before we get into our panel discussion, I want to do just a couple of introductions to the Racial Equity at Work program. Crystal, in the beginning of her presentation, thank you, Crystal, talked about MLT as an organization. So a double click for our program, the Racial Equity at Work certification program was created a few years ago with the goal to help corporate executives understand the drivers for racial inequity and elevate the importance of DEI as the same level as the other big issues that we found our organizations are looking to solve. So this program is the first of its kind, offers two different components. So we've got our first program, which was our Black Equity at Work certification. And last year we were able to successfully launch our Hispanic Equity at Work certification. So both of these certifications often run concurrently, but they are separate programs with the goal of maximizing impact and optimizing efficiency for organizations. Many of our partners participate in both of the programs, but we also have partners who elect to choose whichever program works for them. The program in itself is important. The folks that become certified have access to our growing alliance of folks who are working on this work and are also recognized publicly by our organization and others. So while the Racial Equity at Work program is new, MLT is not. So MLT has been around for the last 20 years, whose goals have been to support employers through their journey of acquiring diverse talent, recruiting those folks, retaining those folks, and also providing DEI strategy and assistance. Our program, because it's been around for so long, we have a premier pipeline of talent with over 10,000 diverse alumni. And so this program is, our program is aimed at focusing on 5 pillars that we believe are important for organizations to tackle around people, purchasing, and philanthropy. And there are 4 main components to that program. So the first component of our racial equity programs are measurement. So we have created a standard and framework that we believe organizations need to be at in order to be considered a racially equitable place for Black and Hispanic folk. That is the first step that our partners take when they choose to participate with us. We believe it's important for organizations, one, to know in an honest and kind of emotional place where they are currently in their journeys. And then also it's important for us to, we have that baseline. We also ask for folk to provide new data on a yearly cadence so that they can also measure their progress against where they started. We also believe it's important for a program to be robust. Folks need to know where they're going. Our partners and people who are thinking about this often have the best of intentions when they go to solve these big issues, but maybe don't always know how to get there. And so our organization, our team is here to be shepherds of support, which is our third main component. To partners, they're not on their own, who are there to act as thought partners, are there to act as connectors. So when folks are looking to solve specific issues, we can connect those partners with folks within MLT and also outside of MLT who can provide that support. And then this is really hard work. So the last component is recognition. We think that it's important to be able for partners to be able to affirm themselves as they're going through this process, solving these big issues, so that we've provided multiple places within the 3-year journey for MLT to celebrate, but also for our partners to celebrate themselves. And then our last slide is just a idea of where we are, where we currently are as an organization and as a program. We got 75 partners who are currently participating in our program, have a number of 18 partners who have already been certified in our Black program, which is, and to the right, you can see some of the folks that are participating in our program.